discovery from deep within the mountains of China. 12,000-year-old ancient stone discs with an encrypted message from extraterrestrials called the Dropa. Some believe they tell an amazing story.
There was an alien crash landing.
Did aliens visit China thousands of years ago? Is there a connection to today's UFO sightings?
I named it the Chinese Roswell.
Is the Chinese government hiding evidence of extraterrestrial contact?
The Dropa stones is the strangest UFO story I've ever encountered.
Join us as we uncover the truth behind China's Roswell. The story of the mysterious Dropa discs begins deep within China's Bayan Kara Ula Mountains. There, a 1938 archaeological expedition led by Chai Pu-Te reportedly arrived to study a series of interconnected caves. What they are said to have found was far more intriguing.
In a cave, allegedly found a row upon row, or several rows of what looked like graves.
But these were no ordinary graves.
Inside these graves were many skeletons buried, skeletons with big heads, big and clumsy heads, and with fragile bones.
And in addition, on the walls, we are told that there were images of these stick figures of presumably these beings, these short beings with the large heads, with images of the sun, moon, and stars.
He also found 716 stone discs, 1 feet in diameter, and they were about 1 or 1.5 centimeters thick.
These have become known as the Dropa stones.
And these round stone discs had a black hole in the center. Some of them have a rectangular notch engraved in them, not cut out. Some of the notches were cut out, others were just engraved. And then they found a spiraling groove of closely written ancient characters like hieroglyphics radiating out from the center.
It is told that the expedition of Mr. Chai Pu-Te brought a lot of these stone discs to Beijing because he had been in the Beijing Academy of Sciences.
According to believers, the Dropa stones were filed away with other items from antiquity. Some 20 years later, one scientist became interested in deciphering the hieroglyphs on the stones.
It must have been at the end of the 50s, 1958 or 1959, when Professor Zum Nui came upon these discs again, and what he could decipher was a very weird story.
It was on the stones that Sun Nui is said to have deciphered the name of the extraterrestrials. They call themselves the Dropa.
The name of the Dropas was written down on those stone discs.
And the story was as follows, that there was an alien crash landing in what is now Western China, 12,000 years ago.
Dr. Nui purportedly faced opposition when it came time to publish his findings.
In 1960 or 61, Professor Zum Nui published his reportings from his deciphering of the hieroglyphs. And the title was something like Hieroglyphs, which are telling the story of spacecraft crash-landed in the Bayan Kara Ula Mountains in central China. Most of his colleagues thought it's an absolute nonsense. And so Professor Zum Nui became very frustrated, and not long after his publication, he emigrated to Japan.
However, the harsh reaction from the academic community in China did not silence the Dropa stone story. A handful of magazines published articles about Dr. Nui's work, keeping the remarkable story of the stones alive.
The first magazine, which was publishing the story was the Russian Sputnik magazine. Sputnik magazine has been in the early 60s a magazine reporting interesting items from behind the Iron Curtain.
After the Sputnik article, researchers say that the story spread around the world.
In 1962 or 63, the Belgian UFO investigator and then German publication, The Vegetarian Universe, they brought the same story again. Until the year 1974, these articles inside the magazines were the only informations we had. It has never been possible to go to China in those years and to ask if the story is true.
But some ufologists, people who research and study possible alien visitation, claim that the Dropa tale was kept alive by oral tradition in the Bayan Kara Ula.
There are some old myths in those mountains which are telling the story of these small, tiny people crash landing from the sky.
Some of the legends claim that the Dropa came from a star system called Sirius.
The ancient story tells that their ancestors came from the star system of Sirius 12,000 years ago. Some of the earliest gods and goddesses who came to Earth, according to legend, from the star Sirius. For example, in ancient Egypt, you have the goddess Isis, the embodiment of the star Sirius. The pyramids of Egypt were built in alignment with the star Sirius.
The theory that ancient gods were actually space aliens is common among ufologists. Author Matthew Hurley has studied the God as space alien idea for over a decade.
Throughout history, looking at many cultures around the world, we often hear of beings coming down from the sky, and we often read of imagery of UFOs.
To primitive humans, the technologically advanced visitors could have easily been mistaken for gods.
They would have arrived in their ancient spacecraft. They would have had an unusual appearance. They would have spoken with a lot of wisdom and knowledge. So primitive man would have been overwhelmed by these experiences and may well have fallen into the trap of worshipping them as gods.
Today, we are left with only 2 verifiable photographs and a fantastic tale, supposedly written in alien hieroglyphs. Did aliens really visit China 12,000 years ago? Next, Matthew Hurley reveals surprising new details about the design of the Dropa stones and proposes evidence that he believes clearly proves aliens did visit in ancient times.
The fact that we have a depiction of UFOs in artworks going back through the epochs, to me, strongly suggests ET and UFO visitation throughout the centuries.
In 1938, a Chinese archaeological expedition to the isolated Bayan Kara Ula Mountains allegedly made an amazing discovery. Inside a series of caves that have never been located again, they are said to have found oddly shaped skeletons and hundreds of mysterious stone discs, now known as Dropa stones. Some say that they also discovered etchings of the sun, stars, and other celestial bodies carved on the cave walls.
And he saw the planets of our solar systems and other stars, and some of them connected with lines made from points. Something like a star map.
In the caves, they find pea-sized dots connecting the planet Earth to a distant star system, pointing towards the origin of the visitors.
Are the alleged star map etchings proof that aliens were in the Bayan Kara Ula 12,000 years ago? UFO researcher and author Matthew Hurley maintains that ancient art from all over the world may provide evidence that early man was contacted by extraterrestrials.
And we look at the cultures around the world and they all talk of beings coming down from above in their creation myths. The fact that we have the depiction of UFOs in artworks going back through the epochs, to me, strongly suggests ET and UFO visitation throughout the centuries.
The earliest examples cited by Hurley date to primitive cave art over 30,000 years old.
Initially, I believe ancient man would have used a branch and maybe scraped patterns in the mud. But then eventually he got hold of minerals such as manganese oxide and ochre and was able to construct beautifully executed images on cave walls, of which we're familiar today, such as hunting scenes and bison and so forth.
Early man also drew pictures of the natural world, including the sky.
Man would have been looking up at the sky. It would have provided a permanent backdrop to his day-to-day living as it does for us today. And he would have observed the passage of the stars and heavenly bodies as the days went on.
Man's fascination with the heavens has remained a common theme in art throughout the centuries. But Hurley sees unexplainable objects in many works of art that he believes may be extraterrestrials.
This example is from an area of France known as Perche-Mille. We've got these curious geometric triangular-shaped objects. Here's an example of a petroglyph from Val Camonica in Italy, dated to 10,000 BC. And we've got two beings which are holding strange implements, and they have what appear to be helmets surrounding their heads.
Interpretations from ufologists support that these images might be depictions of extraterrestrials, but even Hurley admits that other possibilities exist.
I think we've got three possible explanations for these ancient artworks. They could well be real, and people were illustrating what they saw. They could well be fictional and were purely out of the individual's imagination. Or they could well be real beings, but maybe tribal leaders in some sort of ritual costume.
But Hurley is unsure about the origins of the alleged Dropa stones.
I think what we may be looking at in those two photographs are either hoaxes which were done for the story, or they may well be jade discs. Jade discs were created for the wealthy elite of China, and they were placed in their tombs to protect them from demons. The Dropa stones do resemble jade discs, there's no getting away from that.
In fact, the general design of the alleged Dropa stones, disc-shaped with a hole in the center, has appeared in Chinese art for centuries.
Thousands, if not tens of thousands, of these discs have been recovered from sites all over China. From many time periods, there's nothing particularly unique about finding a flat disc with a hole in the center.
Although the shape of the Dropa stones appears to be common to antiquity, the hieroglyphs on them were said to be otherworldly, the script of an alien hand.
They were like characters from other languages. Mr. Tripoutet thought it must be something like hieroglyphs.
But some researchers find the hieroglyph story hard to believe.
So these are discs that are allegedly 12,000 years old that have writing on them, that this Chinese scientist translated. This is very problematic. I mean, first of all, this is an achievement greater than the translation of the Rosetta Stone by Champollion in the 19th century.
The Rosetta Stone was carved in 196 BC in Egypt and lists the good deeds of the pharaoh using three scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. Jean-Francois Champollion deciphered the scripts in 1822 after many years of study. His ability to read both Greek and Coptic helped him to figure out the writing on the Rosetta Stone. Some skeptics have noted the difficulty, if not impossibility, involved in deciphering scripts from unknown origins.
He was able to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics because there were two other languages that he knew. So in this case, a Chinese scientist is able to decipher an allegedly pre-human language and tell the story.
How would you be able to tell the difference between an alien hieroglyphic and an alien human civilization hieroglyphic? So I don't know what to make of this. There's nothing to make of it. It's just a story.
But according to the Dropa legend, there was something extraordinary about the stones. That's why Russian scientists allegedly asked to examine them in the late 1960s. After testing the composition of the discs, the Russian scientists are said to have studied the general design of the Dropa stones.
It was either 12 inches in diameter or 12 inches in circumference, possibly about like this, large or so, with a hole in the center where you could stick your finger through, and had emanating from the center, going to the periphery, a spiral, like a groove.
To describe the Bayan-Karaula stone discs, I can compare them with a modern long-playing disc.
So, like phonograph LPs, the Russian scientists supposedly placed the discs on a turntable of sorts to play them.
Suddenly, the oscillator showed an abrupt movement that looked like the stone discs had some electrical charge inside. The conclusion was that these stone discs must have been inside a very strong electrical field.
Some ufologists allege that the electrically charged stones could have been used to send a vibrating message through space. Were the Dropa trying to phone home, like Steven Spielberg's marooned extraterrestrial in the 1982 movie E.T.? Why were the hieroglyphs written in a spiral pattern? The enigma of the stones persists. Peter Liu, a physicist at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has studied the phenomena of spirals in the natural world.
Anytime you want to simultaneously move, say, from the center of the circle while that circle is rotating, you get a spiral. We see logarithmic spirals on both animals and plants. In the animal kingdom, perhaps the most famous example is the chambered nautilus. Hurricanes, tornadoes are spiral arrangements of storms.
Like the swirling pattern of hieroglyphs on the alleged Dropa stones, spirals are a common motif throughout art history.
In Ireland at Newgrange, the entrance stone is covered with spirals. In China, about 3000 BC, we have these wonderful painted pots with artistically drawn spirals that have been made with a brush and ink. At about the same time, the Egyptians introduced hieroglyphics. They picked a spiral for the hieroglyphic character for the number 100. Spirals are an extremely common iconographic motif. We see them in a wide distribution through space and through time. And there's no reason to assume that it meant the same thing to everyone who drew one.
Coming up, if these Dropa stones are indeed unique and electrically charged, as some say they are, does this make Dropa China's Roswell?